Welcome back to the X Podcast, part 2 of a conversation that we had last week. You have the same shirt on?
I do.
How about you? Same exact shirt
Wow.
on.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
This is
Maybe we'll put this episode a couple weeks later. We all are wearing the exact same thing.
are.
Hold on, let me go change real quick.
Do you
Yeah.
think God orchestrated this?
You think
Strange.
you're the one who wants to do a part 2?
Well,
I just threw
this
out
episode, I think we should talk about who you voted for.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Like
Sounds
it.
great. I go for it.
No, I want to piggybacking off
Ross
the
Perot.
conversation about the question you bombarded us with last episode,
Yes.
which was,
What do you like and dislike about the political left and right?
okay, so we have discovered that Pastor Russ is a socialist.
Yes.
And all sorts of things.
and he's a communist. I think that's what we got out of that. Did we get all of that?
But to find
Yo,
out more, you'll have to
USSR?
read, you'll have to read his book. I'm just
Why?
Oh, hope for the Soviet Union.
For anyone listening for the very first time, I am neither a communist nor a socialist. Just want to say that.
And his book is not about Russia.
kidding. No, man.
Nope.
Well, we got into all sorts of conversation. One of the questions I kind of wanted to go further on was, I asked you who your favorite president was
Yeah.
from each party.
Yeah.
And
It's a good question.
I want to almost shift and use that question in a different way.
Okay.
And what's one historical president that you are fascinated by, or maybe you would have loved to be alive during their presidency, and why?
Wow.
I'll start. Let me start. So that brought it up.
I got mine after you.
Okay. So somebody who is I don't know if I like him or I think the Trump presidency brought a lot of things. People say there's never been anybody in office like him before, and his history would tell you there's absolutely been people in office like him before. So there's just less media. One person that I want to do more research into is Lyndon B Johnson.
Okay.
Okay. He's kind of surfaced in a lot of like documentaries that I've been watching, and he is that hard-nosed, deal-making, like famous for having meetings with his aides and different Congress people while he was on the John doing his business, almost like as a power move. Just a guy who spent a ton of time in the Senate and was all about the deal-making process. And so he's known for what is it, the civil rights something? Civil rights something. Wait, come on.
I'm trying.
it's on the tip of my tongue. Anyway, but he was big for civil rights and had a lot of great things that came from his presidency. He took over from JFK after the assassination. So I just to take the helm at such a turbulent time. Like, can you imagine if that were to happen today in today's world? And just the unrest. And so I think watching his presidency with modern capabilities, I think would be fascinating. And I want to learn more about like his style because it seems like it was a different time, but the way that people governed in the, really just before modern media, I think is a lot more like, it's a lot, I don't know why I feel like I need to be careful how I say this, but I think people wouldn't be as surprised about the way Trump was while he was in office if they had seen more up close with more access to presidents.
But there were people who were around. I mean,
Yeah,
it
I'm not
wasn't
sure
that
I
long
agree
ago.
with that.
Lyndon B Johnson. I mean,
But the media was different. That's what I'm saying. The coverage was
I
different.
cannot speak to that.
Right.
I was not there for it. I have no idea what the media was like.
Yeah.
I can't. It's hard to speak to that.
No,
I don't know. Maybe that's possible.
The Andrew Jacksons of the world. I mean, just unruly. That guy was.
I mean, we've had
Really,
unruly
I don't-
people. I just
Yeah.
President Trump was
Your favorite?
he was distinguished in just so many multiple formats.
Right.
Let me kind of say it that way. So maybe that's a debate for another one, but for me, Teddy Roosevelt.
You don't think that guy was like Trump at all?
Teddy Roosevelt.
Again, you could pick and choose between a few of them and say, this kind of wasn't similar, but I just think
Ran off
Yeah.
and started his own party after he lost the election.
yeah, but then there's the I don't know. I want to be so careful here. I just think
Why?
I'm
Why be careful?
I just
Well, first of all, we're going to speak into our ignorance of really the historical past presidents.
Well,
so
I wasn't
don't know.
about speaking to that. I was about speaking to the present. But I just want to be, I want to measure my words a little bit. But let me say this. For me, if I had to pick a historical president, it would be Teddy Roosevelt, because I like, and of course, this was, I think, a mark in past politics a whole lot more than now, but I like the nuance. He was a Republican that actually, from what I understand, was one of the first Republicans that actually had empathies in the environment. He had environmental empathies, but he was very conservative financially. So there was a term coined after him, Roosevelt Republicans. But he also, I feel like some of the greatest leaders, I heard Craig Rochelle say this before, I feel like some of the greatest leaders are people who also excel and have other hobbies and interests and passions outside of just what they do. And in a way, he was kind of like your Indiana Jones president. You know, like this is a guy, like a man's man that would fish and ride horses and, you know, traverse mountains, and he just had this insatiable zest and strength in life, and then he had it looks like a nuance in thought.
Did he start the national parks movement?
Actually, yes, I believe he did.
I'm trying to look that up. I think he did.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Yeah, he prioritized conservation, established national parks, forests, monuments, and intended to preserve the nation's national resources.
And he was a doer. He was a person of action.
Yeah.
So you're a Republican.
That's what it sounds like. So the president that came to my mind, I had to look up just to verify, because I heard this story not long ago, and it just fascinated me, was Warren Harding.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I heard, and I may not get all the details of this right, so if you know, correct me, please do. But the way I heard the story of Warren Harding becoming president was almost an accident. Warren Harding is a native Ohioan, ended up getting to the Senate, and eventually, I believe he was in the Senate, and eventually got elected president as a Republican, and from what I had heard, was basically one of the worst presidents we've ever had. But if I recall, and hearing this story, he did not have any experience whatsoever. He had, it just goes back to last episode, he had a charisma and a look to him that looked very presidential, that he was groomed to basically to be a figurehead for politics, and ended up winning an election on absolutely no real platform, no real anything, but just, I'm pretty sure it was Warren Harding. I can't remember who it was that, there was somebody that basically saw him, and I think the Republican Party was struggling big time to have a real candidate. And I think it wasn't a hard win, because I think the Democratic candidate was like a real socialist at the time. And this is, quite a while ago. He was I just looked up the 29th president, so this goes back a ways. And it was just fascinating. When he got done, there were scandals. Yeah. There was affairs. There was all kinds of stuff that followed him afterwards. He was it was just one of those pictures of somebody that like what we talked about last week, looked and appeared very presidential, but had no real substance. Right. And no real understanding how to actually be in the office. Yeah. And I heard it was just an absolute disaster. I don't even think he served a full term, if I recall. I just remember hearing the story about him and when I'm like, that is so fascinating. So I kind of would love to just, I don't know, be up front in that process.
I heard a story about Calvin Coolidge.
Yeah, so he was president right after him.
Well, Calvin Coolidge was the first president to deliver an address via radio. And so 1925, radio was, brand new, but he was an introvert. And so in these large settings where he had to project and speak and share, he really didn't do well. But he was great on the one-on-one, and so nobody knew how really radio. I saw this documentary the other day. Nobody knew how the medium of radio would change everything. Yeah. But he was an introvert, but over radio, it sounded like he was talking with you one-on-one. Yeah. And so they say that it was just hugely beneficial.
Just captivate people. Yeah. He was right after Harding, I think. Yeah. Calvin Coolidge was.
Okay, and then we got to talk about Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Oh, yeah.
Fireside Chats?
Fireside Chats. Yeah. What anomaly of a...
Oh,
FDR
my.
Was, wow. Yeah.
Really incredible to think about. That wasn't very long ago. There's people alive today that would remember.
FDR as a president?
right? He was
I don't
into
know
the
if there are.
1940s.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was World War II, right? FDR. I mean, that was during all that.
Let me look it up.
He was the quotes again, way before my time.
Yeah.
But the quotes that have come from FDR
I know.
are like they just leave
feel
you
like
in
he was like
awe
a
and
Churchill
go, yeah,
equivalent.
that's what it feels like a little bit. Probably even at that time, a
Yeah.
Churchill equivalent.
Yeah.
But pretty fascinating.
So what makes someone presidential?
It's a great question.
So here are some figures in my mind that come up as presidential.
JFK.
Okay, JFK.
That's what I think.
Presidential.
If I could go back and see somebody, it would be probably
Right.
JFK.
Not
though.
what you
I mean,
can
if-
do for your country, but what
what-
you can,
his
what country
speeches.
do, what you forget for your country. I got that mixed up. Dang it, Kevin. Obama, like he was
Yeah.
able to
Reagan did as well.
Right,
Look at
Reagan,
that. He
you
carried
know,
himself so presidential.
had the city on a hill, and even down to when after the assassination attempt, and when he,
I remember that.
that balloon went off and missed me. Just things that you quick.
Yeah.
And what's funny is Reagan at the end of his term, if you look at some of the old videos that were out there, I think he slowed down a lot.
Oh yeah.
Mentally. He was the oldest serving president, oldest president ever to be elected when he was elected for his second term. And you could tell he was starting to slow down a little
How
bit.
old was he? I don't know.
70-something, 67.
Because Joe Biden was pretty up there when he got elected.
76
78,
maybe?
77. Well, Joe Biden 77 or 78 when he took office. something like that.
78 when he took office. Wow.
So
That's insane.
I mean, if you think about that, does he run for another term at 82 years old?
There ain't no way.
Like,
Right.
and I feel like there is a little bit. One thing that's interesting, you go back
I
and
think we
look.
can all agree, like, if you love him or you hate him, a little bit hesitant about.
Someone at their old age.
Oh,
just
yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I don't understand why I mean, I guess I do think that there is. Let's talk about being in your prime. Okay. I think there's probably a season where you'd say, hey, this person has experienced enough life, enough education, enough everything to go, hey, they probably, and could carry the weight of that role. But can we also agree that there's an age at which maybe we need to, it's like we have a minimum age to be president. Maybe we should put a maximum age.
Yeah,
I don't
but
know. I mean,
I
that sounds
think
bad.
it's
I don't want to limit somebody who's got an ability older, but, and I'm not saying that to not ageism, but like at what point does
Well, first off, there needs to be
person
more
or party
diversity.
be
It
out of
shouldn't,
touch?
It
That's
shouldn't be
kinda what I'm-
primarily elderly white men. I mean, that there should be some diversity of age, gender,
elderly women,
race. Yeah. But elderly women. But I also think that the devil's advocate of that is I think like people primed. It just really just depends.
I was
Like
about to make the worst jokes.
Oh.
Go ahead.
prime really depends.
I
Because,
don't mean prime in 40s. I mean like 60, like 50s.
But
60s.
again, I look at. I mean, we talk about him a lot. I think Earl McManus just turned 63. He would say he's a decade away from hitting. A decade. Well, he would argue, hopefully 2 decades, 3 decades away. I mean, where you're at. A lot of it depends on your mindset. It depends
Yeah.
on how you've taken care of yourself physically. It depends on a whole lot more. Because there's people that are 30 years old that don't have the youthfulness and the mindset of an Earl McManus. It's funny when you when you put him side by side, a lot of people his age. I mean, there's vast differences. And so, yes, age plays a factor, but I think more important than that, it's experience and mindset.
Irwin's very futuristic pastor out of Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
If you don't know
Yes.
who he is, we like what he does. I think we model a lot of what we do after him.
like the way he thinks.
Right, like the way he thinks. I think that the trouble with older political leaders on both sides, that really the heavy hitters on both sides are
Upper
north
70s.
end of upper 70s, early 80s. I mean, Nancy Pelosi's 80 years old. I think she's
What?
80 years
Are
old.
you kidding me?
Yeah,
You
she's
serious?
80 years old.
Who's her doctor?
Listen.
Holy smokes.
Oh,
Is that real?
That's real. But
I
I,
gotta
think what
look
it
that up.
speaks to.
I'm looking
look
it
it
up.
up.
I'm looking
I
it
think
up.
what it speaks to, the dangerous part are the power structures so cemented in
Yes,
that
yes.
only
Yes,
the people
that's-
who
right.
have
That's what I
put-
was
put in
trying
the
to say.
time
Thank you.
Yeah.
have risen to the levels of power. So I'm excited for the next generation of leaders
Right.
to
That
come
aren't
forward.
career politicians.
I think that's
Right,
what
that
I think that's
hopefully-
kind of what I was trying to get at. It's like,
Right.
when do we have somebody that maybe is more connected to where we're going as a nation and is not tied? Like
Well,
you
you
spent,
think-
I mean, 40. I mean, President Biden was what in the Congress for 47 years,
Long
40
time.
some years.
Long time.
I mean, almost 50 years that he's been in Washington. I'm just thinking after that much time, you're very. I don't know. You're very entrenched.
There's pros and cons to
You know?
it, for sure. I think that, but back to the question of what makes.
She is 81 years old.
Yeah, I know.
I had no
Wow.
idea.
Wow.
So we do
81.
have elderly women in significant seats.
In the line of succession.
Joe
Listen,
Biden's 78.
all I know is that
Kamala Harris is only 56.
I
So
think
point that out.
that I want to talk about what makes someone presidential. And so maybe you can
Chuck Schumer's.
highlight leaders. You could, bring forth some attributes.
Yes.
Of
Well,
what you think.
I think it's important to differentiate between presidential demeanor and presidential behavior, because I think somebody can have a presidential demeanor. I mean, some would argue JFK had a presidential demeanor, but that maybe some of his offstage antics was not necessarily presidential behavior.
What do you mean?
I don't know. I mean, dude,
What are you talking about?
go to Google after this episode. But I think presidential.
Oh, we don't have to go after. I can do it right now.
Yeah.
What do you want me to Google search right now?
Just how to
What do you-
bake.
JFK.
No, it's okay. So when I think of presidential,
Hon.
I think of a few things. I think of the grace of someone, how someone carries themselves. I mean, there's the everyday demeanor of how someone presents themselves. Usually, they have a look of at least they're not just getting up out of bed. Okay.
I won't read that.
You should read it.
What?
Why would you not read that?
Los Angeles Times.
You read it right now.
It's just an opinion piece.
I like
I don't
it
want to
'cause it
just read
proves
because
my
it's
point.
just. I
Why?
feel like it's
it's
hyperbolic
read it.
just to read and have no idea what the article says. I don't have time to read it all. It just said JFK may have been a worse philanderer than Trump. Does it matter? Question mark. Wow. That's an interesting article. By the way, that was from March of 2018.
Oh, what in the
I
world?
think there's a
Wow.
basic.
What kind of world do we
I
live
think
in?
presidential.
So we're
There's,
talking about
there's,
what makes someone
there's a
presidential.
basic dignity with how someone carries themselves into a room. There's a basic maturity that they know how to have interpersonal skills. There's a they know how to speak to people with intelligence. They know how to speak to people without insult. They know how to speak to people. There's oratory skills. There's usually an eloquence of how they. Why are you grinning?
I'm just thinking about some of the recent speeches that I heard when you say that.
Yeah.
I say sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not.
It's 4 billion people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
pray for my president.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm not saying over the last two
Medical.
presidents that we necessarily have
Yeah, had the
a,
best.
a shining pinnacle of example of this. But there's basic oratory skills and there's basic maturity level skills.
I think one of the things that I'll add to that, and I agree with that stuff. I think one of the things I'll add that to me makes
And as far as
somebody
behavior,
presidential.
presidential behavior, basic integrity.
Okay. I think one of the things is knowing how to speak to people who differ from you. So I think, to me, one of the things I really have appreciated about the politicians, I think, carry themselves in a presidential manner. I agree. I want to go back to, I think that the way they live their life I would just say integrity matters. I think what they say and what they do matters. That's something we don't get with many politicians. A lot of promises, no intention to follow through with it, it seems. And I know, I think that's part of the thing. We have to learn and understand that when we hear politicians pitching their stuff, understand that probably 8 out of the 10 things they say they're going to do, they might not even have the control or the power to do. Right. And so to me, I hold all that with a grain of sand. If anything, it should be, this is what I want to do.
Right.
But I think integrity matters. I think what people say and what they do needs to line up big time. And so nothing bothers me more than the hearing reports of, hey, whether it's a president comes out and says this in a speech and then you kind of hear so-and-so over here says that's not the way it was in the White House, or that's not, this is a different person's perspective. Again, what do you believe? Because there's so many political reasons maybe people would come out with stuff like that, true or not. I also think what I was saying is how people can address those who are across the aisle.
Yeah.
I think that to me means a lot. If it's I don't care about you, especially I think one telling thing is when you have a president and then you have a Congress and they're all in power from the same party, seeing how they act in that 4 years or 2 years or however many years it might be, I think, is sometimes telling. Like, how much do they care to reach across the aisle if they have all the power and they can just make all the decisions, say, screw you, we don't care, we can do whatever we want. Like, versus saying, I care about unifying our nation. I care about bringing our people together to understand that this is the best solution for us. So I don't know. And then there's just a mystique. There's an aura. I don't know. There's also the intangible. Yeah. I don't
there's
know
a
how to
leadership
describe
presence.
it, but there's like you said, they walk into a room, the way they carry themselves, the way they look, the way they have their shoulders back, the way there's just something about certain presidents that just you look at them and go, that's presidential, without even knowing the behind-the-scenes integrity.
You hope that that's something that can still happen, because is it a lost art of the way humans are now? I mean, is it something that came from a certain time? I don't know. It's obviously not a prerequisite to be president, but I sure would like to have somebody who here's how I'd put it: inspired towards a common ideal. Can you inspire people towards an ideal? I don't think that either Trump or Biden personally are inspiring figures. As far as like, are their words going to move me towards an ideal?
Well, two things you said: they're not inspiring individuals, and they definitely are not going to try to go towards a common ideal.
Right. No. Exactly. Yeah. And I think Biden tries. Like, I think some of his language but honestly, his inability to articulate it or like just the skill of his speech, I just think it falls flat.
Which is crazy, because his first speech as president, I thought, was incredible. His first speech, go back and listen to it. It accomplished what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like, I almost got emotional because I was like, oh man, like love him or hate him. There was like maturity and grace and like candor and like unity, and like it was presidential. I was like, oh my gosh, and it was like, but almost since then, it's like almost every other speech I'm like, I don't know where this is going, or you're deflecting, or you're
I think a lot of it's recency, what you're having to compare it to, and I don't, I think that what Trump had, I think, is the bigness of what people
the gravitas,
the gravitas of what people look for. He's done big things in life, and so he brings a certain energy into a room. Unwieldy. I think that there's some things there that, if you're talking about war and bombs and things like that, or dictators and having that ability, or negotiating deals with NATO or this or that, like trade deals with China. I mean,
he's the bully you want on your side.
Right, exactly. Like, you'd rather have him on your team, right, than be against him. So there's a bigness, I think, that you look for in presidential people, but I think more so, I look for people, do you have the ability to inspire me towards an ideal? And the one place that President Trump fell, I was hugely disappointed how he handled crisis. Okay. I think that is the mark of a president. So you think, I think what everybody will remember in history of George W. Bush are two moments, and they might seem minuscule, but I think they'll define his presidency. On standing on ground zero with his arm around the firefighter with the megaphone, and he said, but I can hear you, and the whole world hears you. And that moment, I think, for him, how he rose to an occasion to inspire a nation
through compassion
in the middle of a crisis, how he handled that day. History we'll go back and nitpick how he handled going after this or that, or
weapons
the wars,
of mass destruction,
whatever. And history, but I think that as far as speaking, what's presidential? How do you rise to an occasion in a moment of crisis? And so I think that moment for him, shortly after when he walked out on the baseball field at Yankee Stadium and threw that strike first pitch. I mean, there's just certain things that, okay, you might, I know that might seem trivial, but where is your character in the middle of a huge crisis? And we had two huge crises in the middle of the Trump presidency that I think couldn't have been handled worse.
Well, because you want three things out of a leader. You want character, communication, and competency. You want the character of who they are. You want the ability to communicate that in a way that actually inspires, unifies, and move people. And then you want to know that they're actually competent.
Right.
And I think what you're speaking to is, in a weird way, is almost like part of the communication. There is a sense in which that role is so iconic. you want some iconic moments that reflect the gravity of that role and the gravity of that moment.
Well, what do you think about Reagan? Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall.
Yep.
These are moments that that define presidencies because they are strength in the middle of uncertainty.
Yeah.
And with Obama, when they got Osama bin Laden, I mean that's a huge deal. There's, I don't know. You can reflect and you can. And this first year for Joe Biden, I think I would say he falls more in line with Trump on how he's handled this crisis. I mean, there's things that
they tend to come across. I feel like what we've seen recently, just our example recently, has become in crisis has become more polarizing rather than more unifying.
Yeah, I think
At
the way
times
President
they've
Trump
used as political fodder.
Yeah, the way President Trump handled, in my opinion, COVID and the social rights movement, and the way President Biden has handled Afghanistan, those three are shining examples of a dismal reaction to a crisis.
Yeah, that's what sucks. I think I want somebody to, I want somebody to come to the forefront to be like, no, can you lead people to use these crisis moments to pull a nation in a towards a higher ideal?
Yeah, and
there's
one
plenty of
thing
them out
here's one thing I wonder, and I really do wonder. I would be curious your guys' best guess. I wonder when we're going to have our first female president.
I was about to bring that up.
I wonder when we're going to have our first female president.
Yes.
Like I think we're primed for it. I really do. I think it's about getting the right candidate, but I think we're primed for it as a nation. I just think where we've come from, and you need to think about women's rights that and the suffrage movement, and to where we've come. And I think there's strides. There's still some. There's still some pay gap stuff, and there's things that are going on. But I think we've never been more, I think what happens is you get media and all these, TV shows and all these things that start having female presidents, and I think it just starts to kind of like soften the blow of it, people in some people's minds. And but I'm all for it. I'd be all for it. I'm just going to say it. I'd be all for a female president.
Some of my favorite presidential candidates on both sides are females right now.
Yeah.
I like the
Nancy Pelosi. You were telling me.
I like the Tulsi Gabbards of the
Tulsi
world.
Gabbard,
I like the Nikki Haley's of the world. I just think that there's some women out there who,
sharp.
South Carolina,
very sharp.
And gosh, just so much more respectable, I think, than a lot of the the men that we have right now at the top of. And right now, what I hate is like the top presidential candidates are the ones who are play to the extremes, right?
Yeah.
And again, we've been in the middle of crisis, so we've seen extremes, and we've seen people have to defend certain stances, and so it's hard to really nail that down. So hopefully, God willing, things calm down in the world a little bit, and we can
have someone with the courage to step towards the middle.
Yeah.
Or for somebody to go, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Not we see all these variants, and you're going to have to do this, and or else
it's either fear or denial.
Right. It's like, no, how about we can acknowledge a problem,
right.
and we can infuse hope on the other side. I mean, who's sharing about hope right now about America? No,
I know
like,
someone sharing about hope. I know.
Right. But Biden said the other. Can you imagine if the other guy was in here? I don't want to imagine any other guy in here. I want you to tell me why I should have hope that you're going to take us to a place you've never been. That's him.
Right.
That's any Republican, independent, or whatever president. Just paint a better picture.
Right.
What do you think? What do you guys think the future is for bipartisan politics?
Is my cousin right? Is it dead and hopeless?
I'd love
too polarizing?
I would love to put a fork in it, but I don't know that I have that say. I just don't know how I don't know how a third party rises up. I really don't. I don't know how. I just don't know how it can get enough traction. There's so much.
The only way a third party would have risen up was if Trump broke away and started his own. I think that's the only.
And then it'd be just an addendum.
Well, then it would be. Pointless.
No, I'm just saying that's how.
Because
I thought that was going to happen.
Go back to what would happen. Here's what would happen if Donald Trump did that. It would split the Republican side, so the Democrat side would win everything every time.
Right.
It's the same thing, and the same argument was made when Bernie Sanders was running. So Bernie Sanders was running even further left a lot of times, even socialist and other type of things, and he's come out and said that I'm a socialist, Well, the reason why he was trying to get in on the Democrats because they were splitting votes and the Republicans were winning. So if Donald Trump did, that would defeat the purpose. If you're somebody who lives in that camp, like it would. So I just don't see it happening.
Somehow the common sense. That's
Common
dangerous
sense?
to say. I know that's subjective. I think that there's a contingency of Democrats or people that identify as Democrats, independents, and a contingency of Republicans who probably agree on enough to form their own coalition to do something. And
It's kind of like in football. It's kind of like what we need is the Big Ten joining the Pac-12
yeah,
and form this new, and with the ACC, forming a new big conference to take on the SEC.
Or
What
I
we
mean,
need-
maybe this is naive. Or you have a leader that is just so compelling, intelligent,
Transcendent.
and effective enough, and almost transcendent to where people on both sides don't care, but they're like, I want him or her.
Yeah, but that only lasts for one term,
Yeah.
2 terms maybe, and then where are you? I'm just
In
saying
a better place.
Well, and then you're right back to it. I'm just saying I'd rather see a different system. I would prefer maybe it's not. Maybe we're wishing for something that doesn't exist. Maybe
I think
there's no
there are
place you have
things,
multiple
though,
parties.
So I think that personally Trump was like history. I think there's gonna be history books written on that whole presidency because there are things that played into him getting elected that I think was just representative of a lot of things in our country. First off, he wasn't a Republican, and he
was a
as
Democrat back in the 90s.
I mean,
he
but
gave a lot of money to the
there,
Clintons.
there is not a lot of like Republican in him. He ran as a Republican, and he definitely, I think, has captured the party. But still, I think if he were to run in 2024, he's going to get nominated again. I think the whole idea of somebody.
What do you think is not Republican in him now, though? Like when I look at him and I see
government spending, traditionally, I think his view on marriage has changed, but maybe the whole party's changed. I mean, that's the hard part about party. Continue parties are on a political continuum, right? So they'll
Never
shift
static.
with who leads them, right? And so, while Democrat used to mean something, used to mean something different.
Don't you
100
think
years
it?
ago.
But don't
It
you think
all
it would be
shifts.
fascinating if our next election there was just 40 new policies and everybody just went to the polls and voted for what policies they wanted?
Yeah, then we
I mean, wouldn't it be
we
just?
can go drink from the aqueduct.
I know, but that'd be fine. Okay, we can go back to Greece. I'm just. What I'd say is, I'm super curious how things would fall because I just
Yeah, I
wonder
know,
how
it's
many people that would say, "Well, I go in and I just vote Republican," or
why
I
don't
just
we end
vote
this
Democrat.
episode with just naming all the policies and you say which one
I
you're
don't
on?
know
Well, the
them. I'm
problem-
just saying.
Here's my thing: is that okay? Again, here's another historical thing about the Trump presidency that I think is fascinating. Okay, I don't think it's good or bad. I think that it's just fascinating. I think that more people were, for the right or wrong reasons, more people were in tune with policy and the federal government than ever before. Maybe it's because he was saying some things that just got attention. But there were more people paying attention on the political spectrum than ever. Highest voter turnout in 20.
Most people that I talked to were
You think that was
voting
policy,
to.
though?
I'm just saying there's more people paying attention.
I definitely agree with that.
Yes.
And so as far as people getting informed,
They were either really
attempting
excited to
to.
vote for him, or they were going to vote him out.
right. But
Those were basically the options I heard from most people.
so nobody's
I would vote for
involved.
Democrat, but-
So that would be the argument against a true democracy is people wouldn't know enough to make decisions. So it'd be who can get enough people riled up to do a certain thing.
But I think there's a difference in getting people riled
You have a
up
quorum. You have a certain number of
in
people.
emotion and getting riled up in
Certain number of votes.
policy. Because
But
I feel like in the 2016 election there was a whole lot more riled up political emotion than there was political policy. Would you agree?
2016.
2016, because that's how it seemed like to me. It seemed like in the middle of a lot of discontent with Obama, good or bad, someone came along, and we've talked about on this podcast, right or wrong, one of the things about him, a lot of fear-mongering, a lot of passion, and he tapped into people's anger. And I felt a whole lot more people just resonate with parts of him and the message than... Yeah, I
think
agree with him on this
I think the
policy.
reason
I
he
agree with
won
him on
that
this policy.
2016 election was because that FBI special report came out
From
about
Comey?
Yeah, about investigating Hillary Clinton.
Clinton.
Like months before the election, right? Like a couple weeks.
That wasn't an email gate.
Hillary would say that.
But there was. I think that was what
Well,
sunk her.
I think
because what I was going to say about Trump is that he represented the outsider. He
Right.
represented
I'm a drain
the,
the
Yes.
swamp
he had
and-
drained the
I
swamp,
felt like that was
anti-government.
something I resonated with him was here's somebody who's not from Washington coming into Washington who from the outside seemed to have been successful business that again that was a perspective. Don't know how true that is, but was successful in business would be able to come and fix a lot of really economic and all those other kind of policies and things. And you know that was kind of what I saw in it at the time.
And
And it was that or
nobody knew how
Hillary
he'd
Clinton.
behave in the political spectrum, in the political realm. I would actually argue that the majority of people think that his foreign policy turned out a lot better than anybody ever thought it was going to. I think it was a lot of the domestic things that really were horrendous for him.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
Anyway, so we just thought we'd have a conversation about former presidents. I don't know how many people even think or care about any of this stuff.
Listen,
But
I just think it's I like talking to you guys about this because you're able to pull out the higher ideals and perspectives, and the way Russ is looking at me, I know we disagree on some things.
Oh, I love
But,
it.
but
You
what
guys are ardent on different sides, and I just want to go. Can I swim right along this libertarian line? How come we don't, how
so
come
you're
we don't
acting
talk
like
about
you're in the
libertarians?
middle.
I am. How come we don't talk about the Libertarian Party enough?
Can I speak about one thing that disgusts me?
Oh, people have already tuned off.
Yeah,
so it
what
doesn't
I
matter what
hate
you say
about-
at this point.
I saw a tweet the other day. Laura Ingraham from Fox News tweeted, there's some Afghan person who tweeted something about the food that they were getting, and it was some little, just strange, like small portion of some plate. And the guy said, not complaining, but just want everybody to know this is what refugees are getting served at a refugee camp. And she retweeted it or quote tweeted it and said, see, already complaining.
Wow.
And and let me just pontificate for a second, if I may, that when Trump was president, people on the left were doing things like that and using everything as a let me capture every little thing I can, every look, every handshake, everything he says, everything, and I am going to villainize it. And I'm going to villainize every person who even has once agreed with him. Let's just take them all down. And let's just circulate as much information about how horrendously fascist he is. And let's do the same thing now that Joe Biden's president, because that's what politics has become. Let's take a picture of that millisecond he checked his watch at the off-boarding, and let's make it about him looking at his watch. Other than that, it just absolutely is. That, to me, is the most disgusting, and that's what I hope we can rise above as we can rise above as humans in America. That we can rise above this super petty, super low level, tribalist political scene. It's just, to me, both sides has.
They used to. What was the comedian, the late night TV show host that used to have top 10? Was it David Letterman?
Yeah, David Letterman.
And then I'm probably mixing up a few things. Then Jeff Foxworthy had that you might be a redneck if.
Yep, that was Jeff Fox.
We need to start like you might be in a toxic echo chamber if. And on the top of that list is if you spent all 4 years of President Trump's term constantly bashing, maligning, and slandering him, or if you were completely silent during that, but now you're spending all your waking seconds slandering and trashing President Biden. I just want to humbly suggest if you're caught in a windmill of negativity and toxicity, that there could possibly be a better, healthier, more productive use for you to leverage your time and emotional energy into.
How about pray for him? Just
Pray,
quit posting about it and retweeting that stuff. Just getting away from social media for a while. It's amazing how you disconnect from all the shots that are fired across, and you get a different perspective.
And
It's a
find
little
some
healthier.
people that disagree with you and just talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, can you have a civil relationship and a loving relationship towards somebody who disagrees with you politically?
And we didn't even talk about
It's
any
funny.
policies in this. We just talked about things we liked and disliked and
Like
different sides.
I don't know if are we trying to close?
Yeah.
Okay, no.
I don't know. I think that.
Yes.
I hope that we can move towards a place where the person sitting across from us matters more than what we believe about pipelines.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is we need a third party.
What I'm saying is we need a revitalization of what it means to be a neighbor. Mm-hmm. Yeah, what it means to love people, what it means to listen. Right, everybody. We don't do a lot of listening these days. We do a lot of. Everybody can buy a microphone and plug it into their computer. A lot of shouting, a lot of tweeting, and it's like, well, I don't know. I think that the person that can unite the country, I hope and pray they come along. Will pull people towards Can you pull people towards empathy, compassion, those higher ideals? And what's beautiful is it's what the church is about. Yeah. And so if you are somebody who believes in Jesus and who calls yourself a part of the church, it's a mandate that you have is to be a model in how we can do that even before somebody gets 80 million votes to be that on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yes, I
So-
agree.
Yeah.
So who's going to be, last thing, who's going to be our two candidates and the only two candidates that will matter that we're going to be voting for in
That is
3
tough.
years? Who are they
That
going to
is
be?
very
Make a
tough.
prediction right now. We'll mark it down. And hopefully if we're still doing this podcast in 3 years, we'll come back and see who was right.
I want to go last. You go first.
Who?
I have no idea.
Come on,
I don't
you
even
have no
have
idea?
a guess.
I would guess
I
Donald
would guess
Trump
that
and Joe
Trump would be in
Biden.
there.
I would guess that he's going to try
Is
to
that
make
your
a comeback.
prediction?
I do not think Joe Biden will run again. I think Trump will run again.
I don't think he will either. I bet you. I
no.
wonder if it'd be Kamala Harris.
I could see.
I
I could see
wonder if Kamala
I could see a
Harris-
Trump Harris.
I could not imagine that.
My hope it's not going to happen because he
Wow.
said it's another 10 years. Is Donald Miller.
That's not going to happen. Not yet. Who do you think? Do you think there's somebody we're not? I don't know enough of the political candidates. I mean,
You
I
think
like
Buttigieg
watching.
will make a?
Buttigieg.
What I call him, Buttigieg.
Buttigieg.
I think it'll be Kamala Harris and. Oh, well, this is the hard one. It's between
think it's
Ron
Ron?
DeSantis or Donald Trump.
DeSantis has a
DeSantis-
lot of steam right now.
Those are
Yeah.
the two. If there's anybody who's ever had political, but what I've been very wrong before. So I
And
heard-
it's early.
Or you could have a
It
last
changes a
minute
lot.
young.
Yeah.
Who is that? Barack Obama, just
yeah,
to emerge
exactly.
from the shadows.
Exactly. It'll be interesting. So, well, we'll talk to you again in 3.5 years. So, or less than that when they start campaigning. But we love you. We hope you found this conversation helpful,
fun.
We
I
just
don't
like
know.
to be raw and honest with you. And if you disagree with us, I really would encourage you to reach out to Tim or Russ.
No.
And you can talk to them about it. So we love you. Thanks for every like, share, subscribe. And our podcast family means the world to us. So we'll see you next time.